going in, I didn't know if I cared anything about Starfield because I've been hearing the rumors behind the scenes that because of Starfield, we're not getting Elder Scrolls 6 very anytime soon. And so that left a sinking feeling in my heart. After watching the playthrough, the playthrough, the launch trailers, them going through it for 40 minutes or so, I I think I can safely say I am optimistically interested, and I feel as though I will probably get this game. And not only that, it will probably take me through winter to play through the whole thing, and that's saying a lot because this game comes out in September, early September.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will take that L on my sleeve as well as the W. Um, that I predicted or I hoped for it and predicted wrong. That, uh, but essentially, and it for me at least, it piggybacks off of Avowed. Avowed and Starfield are like Elder Scrolls and Fallout, in a way for me, where
Okay.
Starfield is from Bethesda, and a lot of the things that I'm seeing from Bethesda and their previous games, I'm seeing reiterated here. Specifically, what I'm thinking is the face-to-face talking that you see throughout the trailer. Whenever your character interacts with somebody, it zooms in a little bit on their face, and they're talking to you. In the latest Fallout, or in the latest Bethesda game in Fallout 4, I'm not counting 76. In the latest Fallout game, they did a kind of like this movie studios thing where you talk and then they talk and then the dialogue's not all quite there. There's only like a few options to actually talk. And it seems more like
Yeah.
you're watching a movie and it's a little more cinematic. This way, which is my preferred way because it feels like an RPG to me, is up close, impersonal. You're talking directly to and fro someone, and it feels like you're playing a game. It feels like I'm in this world talking to this person, and I'm not some other person witnessing a conversation happening. I am actively engaging in it. That's a
Yeah,
lot.
you're
That's
the
a
other party.
Yes. I am the other party. There's
Yeah.
I don't recall if there was a voice for your character when they speak. I don't think there was. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I can't remember.
I can't remember. But Fallout 4 had that issue where your character had a set voice, and that took me away from the game. But if what I remember is there was no voice with this, it I think what I'm trying to get at is it feels much more RPG than the previous Bethesda games have felt to me. And that is a very key thing for me with Bethesda games is I want to go into a world being a nobody to create and build up myself. I don't want to have a pre-established story already lined out for me. I want to go into a world. I don't want
Yeah.
to go into a story. I want to go into a world.
So from what they mentioned, there is, or rather, there are several different storylines, kind of a bit more Skyrim in that way, but you can just kind of ignore them, a lot like Skyrim in that way. You can just kind of go on and do your own thing. But I think that it would be lacking. It would be almost too No Man's Sky if there was no
Yeah.
story. You know?
Well, even okay, my favorite Bethesda game, New Vegas. Even New Vegas had a story, but the creativity that they wound with how you go about the story, you can do it any way you want. And I'm not talking about the Breath of the Wild way where you can experience the world how you want, so you'll just avoid interacting with like the creatures. I'm talking about, hey, you want to go take over New Vegas? Be my guest. You want to go give it to the cons? Be my guest. You want to go crucify everybody with Caesar's Legion? Be my guest. You want to just have it the way it is, or go off and go do the DLC stuff and end the world in nuclear explosion. Like that's the sort of thing that I want. I want the creative freedom with the way that they're gonna bring me the story. And it does need a story. You're right. We don't want this to be No Man's Sky. At least the early editions of No Man's Sky, which was a
Yeah.
more I'm gonna say boring, where nothing really was happening. It was like, oh, make your own adventures. I'm like, yeah, but you're not giving anything to bounce off of, right?
It's like you
Norm.
want to either side with the Blades or go against the Blades, and that actually impacts the story in a meaningful way.
Yeah, or if they're creative enough with it, have a third or fourth option. Like,
Yeah.
oh, what happens if I just ignore it? Will the story just continue on without me? And then all of a sudden I come back and like, oh wow, while I was off doing something else, things were still happening, and that impact the story. Or maybe you can get some third party in and do a whole like that sort of thing is what I really want out of this game. If they can successfully deliver that, that was my favorite part of New Vegas. That could easily be my favorite part of this game.
And it seems like it's going to be pretty expansive because they mentioned somehow there's going to be one single story, but that there's over 1,000 planets, like, or
Hmm.
1,000, like, uh, not all the planets are going to be like inhabitable. So maybe not all of them will have like story elements per se, but there's at least going to be like 1,000 planets that you can actually like set foot on and like walk around. And even if like 1/10 of those, if 100 of them have like people living on them and like story and plot and stuff going on with them, then that means that this is going to be a pretty expansive game, like
Hmm.
possibly even bigger than Skyrim. As far as like the, because Skyrim had like mainly like six different, like five, arguably six different storylines that you can go through.
Yeah.
And if this is going to be a similar approach with many different storylines, which they basically confirmed, they said that there's going to be several different stories and that you can ignore all of them.
Yeah.
It seems like it's going to be a bit more of a kind of pick your own adventure, build your own adventure the way that you want to play through this world kind of thing.
Hmm.
And that probably almost definitely means, especially if there's multiple factions, that you're going to be able to kind of pick which factions you're going to be siding with, or oh, I decide to do this mission in a different way, which they kind of already also said. Like uh you can like loot certain ships nearby, or you can like do this other thing instead. You can like hail them. There's different ways to kind of go about the story. And if you can do that with story elements too, which I don't see why you wouldn't be able to for an open sandboxy type experience like this, then that means it's going to be like really, really expansive. And for a
Yeah.
game that's apparently 25 years in the making, according to them, uh, this is kind of the only game that could do something like that.
It another thing that I would like to talk to is at least the gameplay aspect of what it is I'm seeing. I like the fact that we're also going to be on a ship and we're going to be doing uh, space fights and whatnot to
Yeah.
mix up the way that we're going to engage with what the game and with the world they're crafting. Because I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, well, okay, well, how are you going to differentiate the combat from like Skyrim or Fallout? Because Bethesda
Hmm.
games, generally speaking, are pretty straightforward with how they deal with combat, and sometimes that can get a little repetitive. I'm thinking Skyrim. If you have a sword, you swing it, and the difficulty of the enemy is not necessarily how they interact with you or how they fight you. It's just how many swings does it take before they drop. And
So
I'm
from what
hope,
we saw it's going to be like a first person shooter,
yeah,
kind of similar to Destiny. Like when I was watching the gameplay, like the combat portion, it was just straight up Destiny to me. Like
hmm,
I can even see which guns were clearly inspired by guns in Destiny. There was like the low gravity jumping. It's Destiny.
hmm,
So if they can do something similar, like feeling the Destiny like a PvE part, I think that it could be way more interesting than just like Skyrim, where you're basically just hitting or shooting magic at a guy until he falls.
yeah, or the probably the easier comparison would be Fallout, where everything is a bullet sponge and the difficulty isn't necessarily on your placement or the skills that you're bringing to the table or identifying patterns in enemy attacks. It's more of how much damage can I do before I or they drop. and
Hmm.
the moment I think Bethesda can figure out that, and hopefully that'll come with this game. I think I don't know how this game can't be number one for the year. I know we have
I
Tears of
mean,
the Kingdom, but this looks to be a pretty big game.
I think that it will be a little bit more position based. It will be more generic first person shooter because from what, or generic as far as like a an open world space exploration game like Destiny goes. But I think that it's going to be more position based because that's what we've seen so far. And also, that's what Bethesda has the most experience making. Specifically, I'm thinking of like Doom and Wolfenstein. The modern games are a lot more Halo like, where the positioning and where you are, like hiding behind of things or when to use what ability, it seems like it's going to be a bit more Doom like in that way.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't expect them to be bullet sponges, more puzzly type things.
Yeah.
Because all of the gameplay that like footage that we're looking at right now, for example, they're going down pretty quickly. It's going to be a little bit more generic, I think, in that way.
Yeah.
If I had
Also,
to guess.
some of the weapons look pretty fun.
Oh yeah.
And I'm trying to think back and to Fallout 4, and some of the weapons that were in that game, and like as much as there was a lot of customizations in that game to change the way your weapon performs, it's still very much the samey. Oh, I was gonna say versus what I like an example that I would bring up is like Dead Space, where all the guns that they would introduce in that game perform very different to each other, and they all have different purposes.
Yeah, even like this little like weapon tree right here reminds me a lot of the weapon wheel in Doom, the modern
Hmm.
Dooms games. It seems like each one is going to have a little bit more of its own purpose.
Hmm.
Like oh, you use this weapon for this purpose, or there's a bunch of enemies, I'm going to switch to this weapon really quick, or there's a lot of cover here, so I'm going to be able to switch to the sniper weapon or something. So it seems like it's going to be a little bit more strategic in that way.
Yeah, that's 12 slots. That's a lot of quick quick decision making or quick scenarios to adapt in. That's actually quite a lot.
Yeah.
It's much more than the typical four maybe eight that you'd normally see.
I wouldn't be surprised if you run into enemies on a planet that are like 20 levels higher than you and are huge bullet sponges.
That is another thing that I really hope they consider. RPGs, I don't like RPGs that have a scaling effect with the player,
Hmm.
where you can go anywhere you want, and and everyone, all the enemies and every interaction is going to be tailored to whatever you are at currently. I don't like that. It doesn't make me feel like it's a world. It makes me feel like it's a simulation, and I want to be in a world.
That's one of the big things that took me out of Destiny is that I was running around in this world and all of a sudden I'm up against like a level 80 like alien thing from Venus or something. I'm like, okay, well, I guess because I'm only a level 25, I can't do this part yet, even though it's just an area of the open world that I should be able to just go through, you know? So it was an FPS, but it focused a little bit too much on the RPG mechanics in that way. And this game doesn't look like it's, I don't know, maybe it'll scale, maybe it'll be more like a scale based thing, like the enemies ramp up in difficulty the higher level that you get. But it also could be like this planet is basically inaccessible to you. You can go there, but it would be a mistake.
It would make sense considering if there's multiple planets and maybe like a percent of the planets are actually habitable. You were to go to a planet that is just insanely hostile against you. That would make
Hmm.
sense in a galaxy game. Odds are you're not just going to be able to go to any world you want and and have
Yeah.
the roughly similar level of difficulty.
I mean, to an extent, yeah.
They didn't say that about difficulty. They did talk about how far you can travel, and they said that you have to upgrade your ship before you can travel to the farthest worlds in the game. So
Okay.
there's gonna be layers of the map that you can't go to in the beginning of the game, and I would expect those layers to be higher level.
Yeah,
That's actually fine, I think.
that's one way of dealing with it, and I think I can be. Then it feels more like a traditional RPG style, which I'm still fine with.